I have said that the Bible is not a book for role playing, putting people into roles or mapping examples of what happened in the Bible onto people, because the Bible is a book for learning and teaching lessons from. And sometimes things that the Bible says aren't literal. They can be ironic or satirical, or they can be facetious. And it's to teach you lessons so that the reader is fooled into thinking that they're believing what it says, and then it suddenly occurs to them, oh, God's actually saying the opposite here, or he's making a point, because I'm so naive thinking that what my heart tells me about morals and the God's law tells me about morals are not being fulfilled in the context of the stories. And one example of this is that the Ten Commandments says, "Thou shalt not commit murder." And yet Cain murdered Abel and was given a mark only so that nobody would execute Cain. And when Adam and Eve sinned, they were expelled from the Garden of Eden, and it was told that the earth from thenceforth, for them, they would have to till the earth and it would yield forth thorns and thistles and weeds. And I've said that sins are not all equal in the Bible, but the Bible fools you into thinking they are, because the reason Adam and Eve were expelled from the Garden of Eden was because they just disobeyed God, and Eve questioned God and disagreed with him and told Adam, and Adam agreed with Eve's temptation, and so they were expelled from the Garden of Eden, which was a normal punishment for what they did. But then it talks about murder and Abel being righteous and bringing offerings to the Lord that were accepted and keeping sheep and being blameless. And his brother Cain was jealous of him and murdered him just because he was jealous that he was closer to the Lord than he was. And then I want to read in Genesis chapter 4 and verse 10. And God said, and he said, "What hast thou done? The voice of thy brother's blood crieth unto me from the ground." That's pretty serious, because Abel was blameless and he was murdered. And his blood was speaking condemnation from the ground and vengeance. Because it says, "And now art thou cursed from the earth, which hath opened her mouth to receive thy brother's blood from thy hand. When thou tillest the ground, it shall not henceforth yield unto thee her strength. A fugitive and a vagabond shall thou be in the earth." Well, that's facetious, because that was the punishment God meted out on Adam and Eve for disobeying God in the Garden of Eden, not for committing murder. And this is trying to show that murder is a lot more serious. But the Bible is being ironic by comparing what Adam and Eve did to what Cain did, and saying the same punishment applies. When thou tillest the ground, it shall not henceforth yield unto. But that's meant to provoke the reader into thinking, hang on a minute. Does God just punish someone for murder the same as punish someone for disobeying God's voice to them, telling them not to eat a fruit? And if you are living in the real world and you know how the real world works, and most people follow the Ten Commandments, they punish murder. But they don't just say you're going to be a farmer and plow the ground because you're a murderer and have to pull up weeds for the rest of your life. They say a murder is much more serious than that, But the Bible here says, when thou tillest the ground, it shall not henceforth yield unto thee her strength. A fugitive and a vagabond shall that be in the earth. And God's trying to provoke the reader into thinking, hang on a minute, that's the same punishment that Adam and Eve had for sinning. And so the Baptists say all sins are equal. But the Bible is being facetious. It's trying to be satirical. And you're supposed to realize from your own heart that murder is a lot more serious. And then Cain said unto the Lord, my punishment is greater than I can bear. I'm a murderer, but my punishment is greater than I can bear. Behold, thou hast driven me out this day from the face of the earth, and from the face I shall be hid, and I shall be a fugitive and a vagabond in the earth. You know, he'll be in exile for murder. And it shall come to... What about what the Ten Commandments says? If you murder someone, you should be put to death. And it says that everyone who findeth me shall slay me. And the Lord said unto him, therefore whoever slayeth Cain, vengeance shall be taken upon him sevenfold. And the Lord set a mark upon Cain, lest anyone finding him should kill him. It means anyone finding him would kill him, meaning they would execute him. And that was not what the verse means. The verse means that, hang on a minute, God's saying he's going to protect Cain for committing murder. And you're supposed to realize, as the reader of the Bible, that what Cain did to Abel, was a lot more serious than what Adam and Eve did. And sins are on a spectrum of severity. Not all sins are the same level of severeness or carry the same penalty. So he got judged 7 times. And Cain went out from the presence of the Lord and dwelt in the land of Nod, or sleep, nod. I'm nodding off because I've sinned, and there's no justice, there's no judgment. So we're nodding until the flood, when God killed everybody. And then when he gave the 10 Commandments to Moses, he says how bad murder is, which everybody today in 2026 agrees that murder is very bad. And it should be held in reverence of seriousness, because somebody dying by someone else who's deliberately killed them is a very serious sin, much more serious than just disobeying God in the Garden of Eden. And people are supposed to realize that. And they're supposed to realize that God is just and moral and punishes people for doing wrong. Not what it says here in the Bible. So Cain had a vengeance on him sevenfold. And then reading further down the chapter, it says that Lamech was born in verse 23. And Lamech said unto his wives Ada and Zillah, hear my voice, ye wives of Lamech. Hearken unto my speech. Lamech was a great grandson of Cain, who wasn't put to death for murder. For I have slain a man to my wounding, and a young man to my hurt. So he hasn't murdered him, he's just slain him by whatever circumstances, manslaughter or in a feud, or not being jealous of him or trying to, because he was upset about it. It says he's slain a man to his own wounding or to his hurt. Well, Cain wasn't wounded. He was sulking, saying, God, I don't want to be punished for murdering Abel, who was acceptable to the Lord, and I was jealous of him. But Lamech said he's slain a man to his wounding, to his hurt. So it wasn't murder. And then it says, if Cain shall be avenged sevenfold, truly Lamech 70 and sevenfold. And the Baptists interpret that to mean Lamech was born nearer to the time of the flood, and sin had increased. Well, what sin? There was no sin since Cain murdered Abel, the worst possible sin there could be. And just the passing of time didn't mean people were slowly becoming more sinful. So God was judging them more severely, so that when Lamech committed manslaughter, he wasn't judged 7 times like Cain. He was judged 77 times than Cain, because it was closer to the time of the flood, and the amount of sin in the world was increasing, which increased the severity of God's punishment. That's the way the Baptists interpret it. But it's not true, because manslaughter is not as severe sin as murder. And the Bible is being facetious, satirical, ironic. It's trying to test what you think as an intelligent person thinking about it. So Adam knew his wife again and bore a son and called his name Seth. For God has said, she shall appoint me another seed instead of Abel, whom Cain slew. Well, that's just making you think that they've replaced Abel. And that should strike something in your heart that that's not right either. But the Bible doesn't say it's not right, because the Bible doesn't have role playing. It's trying to teach you to think and to have moral sense and work out your own conclusions. And then it says, one of Seth's sons, Enos, lived after he begat Canaan 815 years and begat sons and daughters. Well, that's trying to say that the passing of time didn't eradicate what Cain had done to Abel. And he was still aware of Cain killing Abel by calling his son Canaan, to make you aware, as being the reader of the Bible, that Cain murdered Abel. And it was still affecting people because there was no proper judgment and they didn't do anything about it. So the Bible is trying to get you to think for yourself that sins are not all equal, that there's a seriousness to them and they're not all the same. And then when there was the flood, that didn't eradicate what Cain had done to Abel either, because then Noah, after the flood, cursed one of his sons saved in the flood, Ham, for his son Canaan. And the Canaanites were the enemies of Israel. And Israel had to go to battle against the Philistines. And it's because the sin of Cain and Abel had affected people so badly that they were still responsible for it, even after the judgment of the flood. But the flood was the judgment on Cain killing Abel because the people didn't execute Cain. And the Bible said God put a mark so they wouldn't, but that's not literal. You're not supposed to do role playing. That's to teach you, hang on a minute, that's not right what's happened. Murder is very wrong and it really upsets me and I feel sorry for Abel. Now I want to go to Numbers 35 because that is also not literal. Because in Numbers 35 it says, and the children of Israel shall give city unto the Levites according to his inheritance. And it says, appoint you cities to be cities of refuge for you, that the slayer may flee there, which killeth any person unawares. And they shall be cities for refuge for the avenger, that the manslayer die not, until he stand before the congregation in judgment. And of these cities which you shall give cities, you have for refuge. You shall give 3 cities. But it says, if he slight him with an instrument of iron, that's like Cain killing Abel, deliberate trying to murder someone, so that he die, he is a murderer. and the murderer shall surely be put to death. And if he smite him with throwing a stone wherewith he may die, and he die, he is a murderer, and the murderer shall surely be put to death. These aren't laws, these are comparisons, because it said, then you shall appoint you tribes to the city of refuge, that the slayer may flee, which killeth any person at unawares. And then it says, but if he thrust him of hatred, or hurl at him by laying wait, that he may die, or in enmity smite him with his hand that he die, that he smote him, he shall surely be put to death, for he is a murderer. It's trying to show you that murder is very serious. It says, but if he thrust him suddenly without enmity, or have cast upon him anything without the lying in wait, or with any stone wherewith a man he may die, seeing him not, and cast it upon him that he die, and was not his enemy, neither sought him harm, then the congregation shall judge between the slayer and the revenger. So that's showing that people who read the Bible need to realize that manslaughter is not the same as murder. And that's all the lesson is. It's not trying to tell you that if you do this, you must be put to death. And if you do that, you must ask the congregation what to do. It's not literal. It's trying to teach you a lesson that the severity of sin is on a scale, and that murder is worse than killing somebody by accident. And that's all Numbers 35 is trying to do, because they said send them to a city of refuge so they can be put in isolation, so that people can then discover about the person and the crime to see how serious it was. It's not so that you actually send them to a city of refuge and make them live in it, and that everyone doesn't speak to them or rejects them. That's misinterpreting Numbers 35. And the congregation shall deliver the slayer out of the hand of the revenger of blood, and the congregation shall restore him to the city of his refuge. So it's not talking about being in an isolated city. It's talking about being protected and being treated as though you're not guilty of murder because you've killed somebody by accident, which the congregation has judged you haven't sinned. That's how to interpret Numbers 35. Not to say if somebody kills someone, send them to a city and then form a congregation and get them to decide if that person fits to this verse in the Bible wherewith they should be put to death, or fits to this verse in the Bible wherewith they should be restored to the city of refuge. The point is not to role play with those verses in the Bible. It's to teach you that God thinks that certain sins are more serious than others.